I knew something was wrong the moment Ember stopped talking with her mouth open. If you have never lived with a hatchling dragon, you will not understand how strange that is. Ember narrates everything. She narrates breakfast. She narrates the weather. She once gave me a 7-minute talk about the poor design of my bootlaces, so when she spent an entire morning answering me in short, tight little grunts, I knew we had a problem. Let me back up first, so this makes sense. My name does not matter much in this story. What matters is my job. I am a keeper. That is the title the Concord gives to the humans chosen to raise a dragon hatchling from the moment it breaks its shell to the day it is strong enough to fly on its own into whatever life a grown dragon lives. It is not a job you apply for. It is a job you are chosen for, by the egg itself, in a process nobody has ever fully explained to me. One day a message arrives. It says a hatchling has bonded to your signal, and you have 30 days to report to the hatchery station. That is all the warning you get. I got my message 4 years ago. I was working in cargo logistics at the time, moving crates from one ship to another, thinking about nothing more exciting than my next shift. Then the message came, and 30 days later I was standing in front of a cracked egg the size of a large melon, watching a small, wet, furious creature punch her way out of it with her front claws. That was Ember. She was, from the very first second, extremely loud about everything. The medics who checked her over said this was normal for her species. Dragons are not quiet animals. They think out loud, they feel out loud, and as hatchlings especially, they seem to believe that if a thought is worth having, it is worth announcing to the entire room. For the first year, my job was mostly feeding her, keeping her warm, and stopping her from eating things that were not food. Dragons at that age will chew almost anything. Wires, boots, other people's lunch, the edge of a doorway. She grew fast. By her second year, she was the size of a large dog. By her third, she could reach the top of my head standing on her back legs, which she liked to do just to make a point. We lived, and still live, on Hatchery Station Veril, a large ring-shaped station built specifically for raising dragons alongside their human keepers. It has warm decks for the dragons, who like heat, and cooler decks for us, because humans do not enjoy sweating through their clothes all day. There are about 40 hatchlings on the station right now, each with their own keeper, plus a small staff of doctors, teachers, and a handful of adult dragons who act as something between elders and guardians for the whole group. Ember and I have our own quarters near the middle ring. It is a strange kind of home. Half of it looks like any small apartment, with a bed and a table and a cracked coffee dispenser that never gets fixed properly. The other half is built for her, with a warm stone platform she sleeps on, and a low doorway sized for a growing dragon, rather than a grown human. She is, by nature, a curious and talkative creature. She likes shiny things, though she insists she does not collect them, she only keeps them safe. She likes stories, especially ones about space, and she has opinions about almost everything, most of them delivered at full volume. For 4 years, she has told me what she is thinking almost the second she thinks it. That is simply who she is. Which is exactly why the morning she went quiet felt like something had gone very wrong. It started small. She skipped her usual long complaint about breakfast, which should have been my first clue. She usually has a great deal to say about the taste of the protein paste the station provides. That morning she ate it in silence, jaw barely moving, eyes fixed on her bowl like it had personally wronged her. "You are quiet," I said. "I am eating," she said, without opening her mouth more than she had to. I let it go. Everyone has quiet mornings, even dragons, I told myself. But it did not stop there. Through the rest of the day she kept her wings pulled close to her body, which she never does unless she is cold or nervous. And the station was not cold. She avoided the training yard, where hatchlings practice flying in short, careful bursts under supervision. She avoided the other hatchlings entirely, staying close to our quarters instead of running off to argue with her friend Tarn, a hatchling twice her size who she normally cannot stop talking to. By afternoon she had started hoarding things. I found a small pile forming under her sleeping platform, a bolt from the engineering deck, a smooth gray stone, a scrap of shiny foil from a ration pack. Dragons collecting small objects is not unusual, but the way she guarded this pile was. Every time I walked near it, she shifted her body to block my view, as if she were hiding something far more important underneath the pile than a bolt and a rock. "Ember," I said, kneeling near her, "open your mouth for me." She took one step back, her wings folded tighter, like she was trying to disappear inside them. "No, Ember. No, Keeper." That got my attention more than anything else could have. She only calls me Keeper instead of my name when she is scared, and she had not called me that since she was a very small hatchling, in her first few weeks, when everything in the universe was new and frightening to her. I went through every bad possibility a human mind can produce when it is responsible for a young, powerful creature from another world. An infection in her gums, a cracked jaw, something dangerous she might have swallowed. I actually reached for my comm to call the medical bay, ready to explain the situation to the station doctor. The moment she saw what I was doing, she made a sound I had never heard from her before, somewhere between a whimper and a sharp cry, and bolted under the equipment rack against the far wall, pressing herself into the narrow space, as if she could make herself small enough to vanish. That is the moment I stopped being a frightened keeper and started trying, as hard as I could, to be a good one. I put the comm down. I sat on the cold floor, not near her, just close enough that she could see me. I did not reach for her. I did not chase her. I simply sat there, cross-legged, hands resting on my knees, and waited. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "I am not calling anyone. I am just going to sit here." Minutes passed. I talked about nothing important. I mentioned the weather rotation schedule, which controls when the station switches from warm cycle to cool cycle. I told her about a joke one of the engineers had told me that morning, even though the joke was not very funny. I complained gently about the coffee dispenser being broken again, as if this were an ordinary day and nothing strange was happening at all. Slowly, a snout the color of hammered bronze inched out from beneath the rack. "You are not going to send me to the sharp smell room," she said. It was not really a question, it was her checking, the way she sometimes checks the weight of a rock before she trusts it to hold her.
"The medical bay?"
"No, not unless you are hurt."
"I am not hurt.
A pause, longer than usual.
I am changed."
She crawled out slowly, careful and small in a way that did not match her size at all, and sat in front of me. Then, moving like she was diffusing something dangerous, she opened one clawed foot to show me what she had been guarding under that pile of bolts and stones. A tooth, small, white, sharp at the point, no larger than my thumbnail. I felt the fear drain out of me so fast it almost made me laugh, and I understood, even in that moment, that laughing would have been exactly the wrong thing to do. So I held it in and simply said, "You lost a tooth." "I know," she said, with the particular wounded pride that only a young dragon seems able to produce. "I have never lost anything from my own body before. I did not enjoy it. Why were you hiding it from me?" Here is where she stopped looking at me and started staring very hard at a scuff mark on the floor, as if it had suddenly become the most interesting thing on the station. It took a while, and a good deal of patient silence on my part, before the truth finally came out. "Losing a first fang," she explained, "is not just losing a tooth. Among her people, it is the sign that a hatchling has stopped being only hatchling, something raised and cared for and minded by another, and has begun to become true kin, someone whose bond is chosen on purpose, not simply given by circumstance. According to her people's old customs, you do not just lose that first tooth quietly. You present it, formally, to the one you trust enough to want the bond to grow deeper, so that both of you understand exactly what it means. I did not know if you would want that," she said quietly, still speaking to the floor rather than to me. "Humans did not choose us. You were assigned to me. I did not know if you would want to be chosen back. I have handled a lot of strange and difficult situations in this job. Nothing had prepared me for that sentence." "Ember," I said, "look at me." She did, finally, her gold eyes wide and open in a way she rarely allowed them to be. "I do not know your ceremony," I told her honestly. "I will probably get parts of it wrong, but I would very much like to be chosen back." She studied me for a long moment, the way she studies the weight of a rock, testing it before trusting it. Then, with a seriousness that would have looked funny if it had not clearly mattered so much to her, she nudged the tooth across the floor with one claw until it touched my knee. I picked it up. It was warmer than I expected, still holding some of her body heat, and small in a way that did not match how much ceremony surrounded it. "Thank you," I said, because that felt like exactly the right thing, and nothing more needed to be added. Ember made a sound I had never heard from her before. A high, bright, happy call, somewhere between relief and pure joy. Then, because she is who she is, she immediately dropped every trace of seriousness and rushed out into the hatchery to announce to anyone who would listen that her keeper had accepted her fang, and everyone needed to know about it right away. I thought that would be the end of the story. It was not. It was really only the beginning of the next part. Word travels fast on a station full of dragons who cannot keep a secret longer than 10 minutes. By dinner, 6 other hatchlings had asked to see the tooth. One offered to trade a shiny bolt for it, which I politely declined. But more than the hatchlings, it was the adults who took an interest, and that surprised me. The station keeps 3 grown dragons on staff. They are called elders, though I am told that is more of a title of respect than an exact age. The oldest of them, a dragon named Voss with scales the color of old iron, found me the next morning while I was carrying breakfast trays across the warm deck. "Your hatchling gave you her first fang," Voss said. It was not a question either. News clearly moved fast among the elders too. "She did." Voss studied me the way Ember often studies things, with a long, careful stare that seemed to weigh more than it should. "Do you understand what you accepted?" "I am starting to," I said honestly. She explained some of it. "I think there is more I do not know." Voss made a low sound in his throat that I had learned, over the years, meant something close to approval. "There is more. The fang marks the end of hatchling years. It also opens the next stage of her growth, which humans are usually not prepared for." That got my full attention. What kind of growth? "Her body will change faster now. Her wings will strengthen. Her fire will begin to form, where before she only had smoke. And her mind will begin asking harder questions about who she is and what she owes to the bond she has chosen." Voss paused. "Many hatchlings choose not to present the fang at all. If they are unsure of their keeper, it is not required. It is a choice." I thought about that for a moment. What happens if they do not? The bond stays as it was. Kind, perhaps. Comfortable. But it does not deepen the way hers has now deepened with you. Voss lowered his great head slightly. The closest thing to a nod I had seen from him. "She trusted you enough to risk it. That is worth understanding fully, Keeper. Not simply accepting with thanks and moving on." I carried that conversation with me for days. It changed how I looked at Ember, even though she seemed, on the surface, exactly the same. She still narrated breakfast. She still argued with Tarn about whose turn it was to use the best training perch. She still complained about the coffee dispenser on my behalf, as if it had personally wronged her too. But I started noticing small changes, the kind Voss had warned me about. Her wingspan grew nearly a full measure in 2 weeks, which the station doctor said was unusually fast even for a dragon her age. During training flights, she managed short bursts of true fire for the first time, rather than the harmless curls of smoke she had always produced before. She was proud of this, loudly and at length, but I noticed she was also a little frightened by it, the way anyone might be frightened by discovering a new and powerful part of themselves. One evening, about 3 weeks after the fang, she came back from training looking unusually tired, wings drooping, and settled onto her warm stone platform without her usual string of complaints about the day. "Are you all right?" I asked. "I burned the target mat," she said, "by accident. It was only supposed to be smoke. Was anyone hurt?" "No. But Trainer Sale looked afraid of me. Just for a moment. Then she was not afraid anymore, and she told me it was good progress, but I saw it. The fear, just for a moment." I sat down near her platform, close enough to reach her without crowding her. "You are getting stronger, Ember. Stronger things are sometimes a little frightening, even to the people who care about you. That fear is not the same as her not wanting you around." She was quiet for a while, turning that over. "Will you be afraid of me, when I am bigger, when my fire is not an accident anymore?" It was a fair question, and I did not want to give her an easy answer, just to make her feel better in the moment. "I do not know," I admitted. "I have never lived with a fully grown dragon. Maybe there will be a moment where something surprises me, and I feel afraid for a second, the way Trainer Sael did. But being afraid for a second is not the same as stopping the bond. You gave me your fang because you trusted me to stay, even while you changed. I plan to keep that trust, even through the parts that surprise me." She was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence than the one from that first strange morning. This one felt calm, not frightened. "I would like that," she said finally, quietly, without any of her usual volume. "I do not think I explained that very well. I would like that very much." The following month, the station received a notice that shook the entire hatchery. A Concord inspection team was coming to review the bonds between keepers and hatchlings across all the stations, to make sure the program was running as intended. Word spread that inspection teams sometimes moved hatchlings to different keepers if a bond seemed weak, unstable, or one-sided. Every keeper on the station suddenly became very nervous, myself included, though I tried not to let Ember see it. She saw it anyway. She always does. "You are worried," she said one morning, watching me over breakfast with narrowed eyes. "A little," I admitted, because lying to her rarely works and always makes things worse when she finds out. "About the inspection." Yes. They will not take me away, she said with a confidence that startled me, given how nervous she usually was about new and uncertain things. I gave you my fang. That is not something an inspection team can undo with a clipboard. I wanted to believe her, and mostly I did, but a small nervous part of me kept turning the thought over anyway, the way you worry at a loose thread even when you know pulling it will not actually help. The inspection team arrived a week later. 3 officials in gray Concord uniforms, along with an older dragon I did not recognize who moved slowly among the hatchery pens with an expression I could not quite read. They spoke with each keeper individually, asked questions about routines, watched training sessions, and reviewed medical records. When they reached Ember and me, the older dragon inspector studied us both for a long moment before speaking. She presented her fang to you, the inspector said. It was once again not really a question. News apparently travels along channels I still do not fully understand. She did, I said. The inspector turned to Ember directly, which surprised me, since most of the officials had been speaking mainly to the keepers rather than the hatchlings themselves. Why him? The inspector asked her. Out of everyone on this station, why did you choose to deepen the bond with your assigned keeper rather than waiting, or choosing differently later? Ember did not hesitate, which surprised me even more than the question itself. Because when I was small and afraid of everything, including the dark and the training yard and my own fire, he sat on the floor with me instead of telling me to stop being afraid. He still does that. I do not think that changes just because I get bigger. The inspector was quiet for a moment, then made a low sound very similar to the one Voss had made weeks earlier, the one I had learned to recognize as approval. That is a good answer, the inspector said, and moved on to the next pen without further questions. We passed the inspection. So did most of the station, as it turned out, though 2 bonds elsewhere were flagged for extra support, not separation, which relieved everyone once the final results were posted. Ember was insufferably proud of her answer for at least a week afterward, repeating it to anyone who would listen, sometimes twice to the same person. Life on the station slowly returned to its normal rhythm after that. Ember kept growing, faster than before, exactly as Voss had warned. Her fire became steadier and less accidental. Her flights grew longer, and her wingspan eventually caught up with, then passed, her friend Tarns, which she never once let him forget. A few months after the inspection, something happened that I still think about often. A new hatchling arrived on the station, a small, pale green creature named Rue, paired with a young keeper named Daniil who had transferred over from a different cargo route, much like I once had. Daniil was nervous in a way I remembered well, the kind of nervous that comes from caring about doing something right without knowing yet what right even looks like. Rue would not eat for the first 2 days. She would not fly. She spent most of her time pressed into the corner of her pen, wings folded tight, refusing to speak to anyone, including Daniil. The station doctors said this happened sometimes with hatchlings taken from difficult hatching conditions, and that patience was the only real medicine for it. Daniil came to me one evening, worried and unsure, asking if I had any advice, since Ember and I were often pointed to as an example of a strong bond. I did not have a clever answer. I only had what I remembered from that first year, when Ember was small, and the world was too loud and too bright for her most days. Sit on the floor, I told him, not close enough to crowd her, just close enough that she can see you are not leaving. Talk about nothing important. Let her come to you when she is ready, instead of the other way around. Daniil looked doubtful, the way I probably looked doubtful once, but he tried it that same night. It took almost a week before Rue finally crawled out of her corner on her own and ate a full meal in front of him. It took another 2 weeks before she said her first real word to him, which the whole hatchery celebrated as if it were a holiday. Ember, of course, took a great deal of personal credit for this, since it had been her fang story that first taught the newer keepers to sit and wait instead of rushing in with worry and comm calls. She reminded Daniil of this fact often, and reminded me even more often, as if I might somehow forget that the lesson had started with her. You are very proud of yourself, I told her one evening, not long after Rue finally settled in. I should be, she said, with total confidence. I invented patience. You did not invent patience, Ember. I improved it, she said, and refused to discuss the matter further, which was, I had learned by then, exactly how most of our disagreements ended. She still talks constantly, about breakfast, about the weather, about my bootlaces, which she still believes are a design failure worth revisiting every few months. She still hoards small shiny objects under her sleeping platform, though now she openly admits she is collecting them rather than pretending otherwise. She still argues about training schedules and complains loudly on my behalf about the coffee dispenser, which the station finally, after 4 years, agreed to replace. But there is a small drawer under my bunk that has not changed since that first strange, quiet morning. It holds a few things from home, objects I brought with me when I first arrived at the station, back when I still thought this job would be mostly about feeding a hatchling and keeping her out of trouble. Now it also holds one small white tooth, no larger than a thumbnail, wrapped carefully in a scrap of soft cloth. Sometimes, when Ember thinks I am not paying attention, I catch her glancing toward that drawer with an expression I have come to recognize. It is not worry anymore, the way it was that first morning. It is something closer to quiet pride, the look of someone checking that a promise she made is still being kept. I do not know exactly what the years ahead will bring. Voss tells me dragons her age still have a long road of changes in front of them, some exciting, some difficult, most of them loud, if Ember has anything to say about it, which she usually does. But I know this much for certain. She trusted me with something small and important once, on a morning when she was frightened and did not think I would understand. I intend to keep proving, every single day after, that she was right to trust me. Some mornings that means sitting on a cold floor, waiting patiently while she works up the courage to talk. Other mornings it means standing in a scorched training yard, telling her that being a little frightening sometimes does not mean losing the people who care about her. Most mornings, honestly, it just means listening to her talk about breakfast, or the weather, or my bootlaces, all over again, at full volume, exactly the way she always has. I would not trade a single one of those mornings for anything.